Welcome to our orientation on the Data Privacy Act of 2012. In today's digital age, understanding data privacy is more crucial than ever. This act was created to protect personal information and ensure that data is handled responsibly and ethically. The purpose of this orientation is to ensure that we comply with the regulations of the National Privacy Commission regarding the Data Privacy Act. Before we begin, here's a quick reminder. There will be an examination after this video. To access the exam, you will need to enter the code. This code will be shown throughout the video, so make sure to watch attentively and, of course, watch it in its entirety. Let's start. Before anything else, what is the right to privacy? The right to privacy is your right to keep your personal information and activities private. It means that you have the control. You have the control over what you share about yourself and who can access that information. Let us try to understand data privacy in the context of the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution gives emphasis to digital technology. In this day and age of modern tech, the collection, processing, and use of data has become more prevalent. Due to this, data privacy has become more important. Modern technology requires stricter rules or standards to protect one's information. Of course, we have to know what exactly is data privacy. Data privacy is the proper handling, processing, and storage of personal information. It ensures that personal data is collected, used, and shared only for specific and legal purposes. So, why is data privacy so important? Data privacy protects people from identity theft and fraud. It establishes trust between the company and its customers. Of course, it ensures compliance with legal regulations. It can't be helped that there would be some misconceptions formed regarding data privacy. Let's dive into a few of them. Applies only to the cyber world. Many people believe that data privacy only concerns online activities and digital data. The law for data privacy covers various types of data, not just digital or online information. Data privacy applies to any personal data, regardless of its form, be it electronic or digital, on paper, or any other format. Some examples include medical records and physical documents containing personal information are covered by the Data Privacy Act. Private interactions on social media are under the Data Privacy Act. There is a common belief that all private interactions on social media platforms are protected under the Data Privacy Act. While it provides protection for personal information shared on social media platforms typically have their own terms of service and privacy policies that users agree to when signing up. These agreements can affect the extent of protection under the Data Privacy Act. Moreover, private interactions may still be monitored by the platforms itself. It is important to be cautious about the social media platforms used, particularly their privacy settings and policies. This won't affect me because I did not give my consent. Some people think that if they have not explicitly given their consent to use their data, they are not covered by data privacy regulations. Consent is an important aspect, but it is not the only consideration. The Data Privacy Act also places obligations on organizations to ensure that personal data is processed fairly and legally, even without consent. Only my personal information is important to me. Only my personal individuals may think that only their basic personal information, such as name, address, and contact number, is important under the Data Privacy Act. This act protects a broader range of information beyond personal details. This includes any data that can directly or indirectly identify an individual, such as biometric data, IP addresses, location data, and behavioral data like your browsing history. Additionally, sensitive personal information such as health records, financial information, and ethnic or racial data has special protection under data privacy laws. Here are some key terms to know to fully understand the Data Privacy Act. First, the Personal Information Controller or PIC. First, the PIC is typically an organization, company, or individual that decides how personal information is collected and used. Essentially, they are the users of personal information. Think of it this way: the PIC is like a boss who decides what to do with the personal data. The Personal Information Processor, or PIP. This is the person or individual who processes personal information on behalf of the PIC. If the PIC is a boss, think of the PIP as the employee who follows the boss's instructions on how to handle the data. The next ones are the most important terms to remember in data privacy. These are the terms that you will hear the most. First, the data subject. First, the data subject. This is the person who owns the personal information being processed. They are the source of the personal information. Next, and perhaps most importantly, consent. It is a permission given by the data subject to process their personal information. It must be given voluntarily. It must be clear and specific. The person providing the consent must be informed about how and why their information will be used. Here are some general principles to guide you regarding privacy. Transparency. Be clear. People should know why and how their personal information is collected and used. There should be no hidden purposes. Legitimate purpose. Have a good and proper reason. Collect personal information only for specific and legal reasons. Proportionality. Collect only what is necessary and nothing more. Fairness. Treat people fairly. Process personal information in a way that does not cause misuse or harm to that person. Data minimization. Keep it minimal. Collect and store only the necessary personal data for the purpose. Do not store unnecessary data. Accuracy. Keep the data accurate. Ensure that personal information is accurate, up to date, and complete. Correct any errors immediately. Accountability. Be responsible. Organizations and individuals handling personal data should be responsible for its protection and comply with the law. We have been talking about personal data all this time, and it is important to know that there are different types. Trust me, knowing the difference will come in handy later on. First, personal information. This is any data that can be used directly or indirectly to identify you. For example, your name, address, email address, contact number, or birthday. Next, sensitive personal information. This is data that is more private and requires additional protection. For example, your race, religion, health records, marital status, and government issued ID numbers. Privileged information. This is data protected by law and is typically shared in a confidential setting. For example, communication between you and your lawyer or your doctor. Of course, data subjects have their rights, and it is important to be familiar with them. The right to be informed. As data subjects, you have the right to know if your personal data is being collected, processed, or recorded. Right to access. As data subject, you have the right to confirm if data related to you is being processed and to obtain information about the following: content of personal information and data being processed, the source of personal data if it wasn't obtained from the data subject, the purpose of processing and the method of data processing, the names and address of recipients or collectors of personal information, the reason for collecting personal information from the collectors, date when the personal data was last accessed and modified, period or how long specific categories of information are stored, and the designation, name, and address of the data protection officer of the PIC. The right to object. As data subjects, you have the right to object to the processing of your personal data if the processing is based on your consent or legitimate interest. So, when can you object to the processing of your data? So, if there is a significant change in the information provided to you in a consent form, privacy notice, or similar communication, you must be notified and given the opportunity to object or withdraw your consent. The right to erasure or blocking. As data subject, you have the right to request the suspension, withdrawal, blocking, deletion, or destruction of your personal data from the PIC's filing system. You can exercise your right if you discover and have proof of any of the following. If your data is incomplete, outdated, incorrect, or obtained unlawfully. If it was used for unauthorized purposes or no longer necessary for the purposes they were collected for. If it's harmful to the data subject. If the data subject objected to the processing and there is no other legal basis for the processing. If the processing is illegal. And of course, if the PIC or PIP violated the data subject's rights. The right to rectify. As data subject, you have the right to object to incorrect or erroneous personal data and have it corrected by the PAC within a reasonable time. The right to file a complaint. If you believe that your personal information has been misused, maliciously disclosed, or improperly disposed of, or that any of your data privacy rights have been violated, you have the right to file a complaint to the National Privacy Commission. The right to damages. As data subject, you have the right to be compensated for any damage caused by inaccurate, incomplete, outdated, unlawfully obtained, or unauthorized use of your personal data. As a data subject, you have the right to obtain from the PIC a copy of your personal data and transfer this data to another PIC. Here are some common data breaches that occur due to poor handling of data. Perhaps most commonly, unauthorized access to data. Data leaks through unsecured communication channels. And of course, there are cases of data loss due to theft or loss of equipment. Here are some steps to guide you in order to prevent these common data breaches. Immediately report any suspected violations to the data protection officer, so familiarize yourself with them. Conduct a comprehensive and thorough investigation to estimate the severity or extent of the data breach. And lastly, notify relevant persons and, of course, authorities. It is also important to discuss the consequences or penalties for noncompliance. Remember when I said that knowing the difference in types of personal information will come in handy? Well, note that the possible years of imprisonment and fines varies depending on whether the information is personal or sensitive personal information. Unauthorized processing of personal information. Imprisonment of 1 to 3 years and a fine of 500,000 to 2 million pesos. For sensitive personal information, imprisonment of 3 to 6 years and a fine of 500,000 to 4 million pesos. Accessing information due to negligence. For personal information, imprisonment of 1 to 3 years and a fine of 500,000 to 2 million pesos. For sensitive personal information, imprisonment of 3 to 6 years and a fine of 500,000 to 4 million pesos. Improper disposal of personal information. Imprisonment of 6 months to 2 years and a fine of 100,000 to 500,000 pesos. For sensitive personal information, imprisonment of 1 to 3 years and a fine of 100,000 to 1 million pesos. Processing information for unauthorized purposes. For personal information, imprisonment of 1.5 to 5 years and a fine of 500,000 to 1 million pesos. For sensitive personal information, imprisonment of 2 to 7 years and a fine of 500,000 to 2 million pesos. Malicious disclosure, imprisonment of 1.5 to 5 years and a fine of 500,000 to 1 million pesos. Unauthorized disclosure of personal information, imprisonment of 1 to 3 years, and a fine of 500,000 to 1 million pesos. For sensitive personal information, imprisonment of 3 to 5 years, and a fine of 500,000 to 2 million pesos. A series or combination of the aforementioned violations can grant you imprisonment of 3 to 6 years and a fine of 1 million to 5 million pesos. To avoid being the recipient to any of those penalties and hefty fines, here are some general tips to remember when handling data and information. Always explain why you need personal information and obtain explicit consent before collecting it. Ensure individuals understand how their data will be used and stored. Access control. Only authorized personnel should have access to files such as resumes and job applications. Use secure access control mechanisms like passwords and encryption. Store physical copies of files such as resumes in locked cabinets. Meanwhile, store digital copies in secure, encrypted databases or cloud storage solutions. When sharing files that may contain confidential information, use secure channels like encrypted emails or secure file transfer protocols. Avoid using unsecured methods like regular email or public file sharing services. Practice the clear desk policy. Keep your desks clear of sensitive documents, especially when stepping away from your workspace. Ensure that all confidential information is securely stored at the end of the day. Handle information with extra care. Avoid discussing sensitive information in public or open areas. Proper disposal. Shred physical copies of documents such as resumes that are no longer needed. Permanently delete digital copies from all storage locations, including backups. Labeling. Clearly mark documents containing sensitive information as confidential to ensure proper handling. You are encouraged to report any data privacy incidents or breaches immediately. Have a clear process in place for investigating and responding to reports. And of course, stay informed about legal requirements and regulations. Ensure all data handling practices comply with relevant laws and standards. Always remember, as data subjects, know your rights. As PICs or PIPs, to follow rules and regulations. The correct handling of data and information is our responsibility. Thank you. You may now proceed with the exam. Simply enter the code that flashed during the video and you should be able to access it. Good luck.